When it comes to role-playing games, you have to have a little bit of improvisational skill. Unlike board games, there's no set script of actions that you're supposed to do on every turn. You know, roll the dice, move your piece, pass the dice, and wait until it's your turn to roll the dice again. In role-playing games, you're just kind of making it up as you go along, and you're doing it at the same time that everybody else at the table is making it up as they go along, and that can be a really intimidating way of interacting with people. Some folks think they're not creative enough to engage with one another like that. There's a fear that whatever is inside their head, that cool idea that they have, is not cool enough, or that nobody's gonna get it. And I get that. I think about that stuff all the time, even when I'm doing stuff like this. So how do we get around that? I used to, years ago, direct and perform in an improv group, improvised comedy. And while I was doing that first semester, I also got to teach kids on how to improvise comedy for a show. They were 12 to 14 years old. And that has to be the most self-conscious, awkward time period of anybody's life. None of them wanted to look stupid. And that's kind of what they signed up to do, or what their parents signed them up to do. So I had to work with them every week for a while until they felt comfortable. And by the time they got in front of an audience and performed their show, they killed. They were hilarious, and they let themselves go and just performed what came up in their brains. And it was all really, really funny. This video is about improv structure, how that relates to role-playing games, and what it takes to feel comfortable being creative in front of whoever you're playing with. Hey, what's up? I'm Jay. And there are two types of improvised comedy structures: long form and short form. Short form is the one that most people are familiar with. It's the stuff you've seen on TV. If you've ever seen Whose Line Is It Anyway? That's short form comedy. It's essentially games that performers play that have rules that facilitate comedic moments. One example of this is the alphabet game. This is where two performers do a scene where every line of dialogue has to start with the next letter in the alphabet. And anytime somebody screws up, that character dies, just suddenly, miraculously dies. And another performer takes their place, picking up where the alphabet left off, whatever letter they were on. Already you can kind of see how this would be funny. Audiences really like watching the mental gymnastics of performers trying to come up with their next line. There's the slapsticky deaths that happen whenever a performer can't come up with a word that starts with Q at the right moment. But there are a few considerations that the improviser, the performer on stage, has to take into account when they do the alphabet game. One, it's got to be quick. Audiences don't want to watch an improviser carefully come up with the next line of dialogue. It kills the energy, the timing. It's not funny. It's boring. Two, the scene should try to make sense. I mean, as best as it can. It shouldn't be a bunch of nonsense, a bunch of non sequiturs that have nothing to do with whatever was said before and whatever is going to be said afterwards. And all they have in common is that they start with the next letter of the alphabet. It should try to make sense. That means that the performers have to be listening to each other, and they have to be reacting to what the other person is saying while at the same time actively trying to come up with whatever the hell it is that they're supposed to say next. That's not the easiest. But when you watch one of these games performed that adheres to the rules of the game while at the same time makes sense, it's an incredibly rewarding experience. And that's short form improv. Quick, short games with wacky rules meant to facilitate comedy. Long form is a little messier. It's a little bit more loose in structure. The most popular of long form structures is the herald. It's where a group of performers ask for one word from the audience, and that one word inspires everything they're going to do for the rest of that night. And then they break off into scenes. They start with an A scene, a B, and a C scene. And then there's a break somewhere in there where somebody performs an improvised monologue, or maybe they perform a song or something. And then we go back to the same scenes and see how they've changed and evolved. Go back to the A, the B, the C, another break. And then for the third act, we kind of wrap up those scenes. And all the scenes, like, maybe kind of connect to each other, but they don't really have to. But that's the structure. That's it. There's no alphabet game rules to make people laugh or to make sure you're funny. You just kind of have to do it. You just kind of have to be funny on your own, or just be whatever you can be, and just try to do a scene with somebody else that you're completely inventing. It's hard. It's hard, and it's intimidating. Unlike short form improv, long form improvisers have a little bit more room to explore without some wacky rule imposing its will on the scene. Sometimes this can lead to really entertaining work that's deep and profound. I've seen people cry at a good improvised scene. And then sometimes long form can be really bad, really boring, meandering, messy, self-indulgent. Those nights are rough. And any improviser will tell you that it is just as easy to have the awesome night as it is to have the terrible, give me that bottle of vodka, I want to crawl up in this hole and die, where's my mom kind of night. Usually whenever you have a great night, it feels effortless. Like everybody is just there for one another, supporting each other's ideas. It feels scripted, like it was meant to be. Whenever that happens, it's like a spiritual event. I'm not religious, by the way, but whenever I was performing in a show and everybody was just flowing and vibing off of each other and everything was connecting, spiritual is the only way I think I could describe it. A holy communion between individuals, if I were so bold. And in this case, I think I am. And that's why I love role-playing games, because I can get that same feeling without a stage, without an audience, and without people who are trained performers. They're just folks being creative. Role-playing games kind of inhabit this space between long-form and short-form improv. Depending on the system you play, it might lean a little bit more towards one than the other. Dungeons and Dragons, for example, it has rules in it to facilitate and resolve conflict, whether it's combat or even social. And much like the alphabet game, if you fail, the rules will kill you and replace you with somebody else. When I'm running a game, I try to listen to my players. And I try to direct them to listen to each other. And that doesn't mean just waiting for somebody to stop talking so you can interject with your nonsense. It means reading the vibe of the room, seeing where everybody's going, and connecting to that. That doesn't mean you have to be passive and follow along. If you're listening to them, they should also be listening to you. So there isn't a leader. Everyone's kind of leading each other. There's this game that actors play. It's called mirroring, where two people stand in front of each other and they start to mirror one another's movements. The point of the game is not that one person leads and the other person follows. The point of the game is to get into this headspace where neither one of you is really sure which one of you initiated the movement, but you're ending up at the same position at the same time. You're putting yourself in a strange headspace of leaderless following, and that can be really useful for role-playing games. And to get there, you can still be yourself, but you have to sacrifice a little bit of your ego in order to tell the story everybody at the table wants to tell. And it's that kind of sacrifice that requires one of the major components of improvisational theater: trust. Rehearsal for improv groups is really just hanging out and playing games, the same games that they would play in front of an audience, but it's just for them. And it's not so that they can find the jokes early and then try and recreate them on stage later. It's just so they can feel each other out and gain each other's trust. The more you trust, the more you listen. And the more you listen, the easier it is to create scenes. You get into this kind of group mind where you just kind of know where the other person's going to go before they go there. It makes everything so much easier. Without trust, you just kind of get performers who are going it alone, playing for their own laughs. The scene, their partner, their team, doesn't matter. It's what they get that matters. And when you have somebody like that, audiences can tell. They know when somebody is just in it for themselves. Trust and listening go hand in hand. Without trust, most people don't listen. Look, I get it. That if for you, trust is not at the forefront of your concerns when you're wanting to just sit down and play Dungeons and Dragons with your buddies. But I would say that for a lot of folks, maybe even more than you realize, there's a fair amount of vulnerability that comes with engaging in role-playing games. You got to invent a character. You got to improvise all their actions. You got to make all the other little decisions that come with any RPG. That can be a tall task for somebody, especially if they're the introverted type. And just like those 12 to 14-year-old kids that I was talking about earlier, nobody wants to look stupid. Nobody wants to screw up anyone else's fun. I think that's the case no matter how deep or shallow you want your role-playing game experience to be. Even me, when I'm just playing a barbarian, killing some orcs with my buddies, the weight of human interaction can be really fucking heavy. For me, it is anyway. So how do we develop this trust between our fellow players, whether they're our friends or, strangers that you reply to on a random Discord channel for RPGs? Playing together, right? Talking, listening, that whole communication racket. For some folks, it clicks right away. There's like an instant chemistry. It just works. But if that's not the case and you're still filling each other out, I think that if you take the initiative and support somebody else's idea, they'll usually try to support you back. That's why the first rule of improv is yes and. You just affirm the previous statement and add to it. I have a car. Yes, and there is a bear in it. Now we have a scene about a bear and a car. You're probably thinking that sounds really great in theory, but at some point, somebody somewhere is going to say something that fucks up the game. And you're right. You're absolutely right. Just try to support them. Try to roll with it and make it work out. And if it still turns into a disaster, and that's going to happen too, just communicate with them and support them in getting back on track. Maybe next time it's going to be you that takes that hard left when everybody else went right. And if that's the case, you got to be ready and open for that communication to you as well. It's when the communication stops that the trust is gone. And when the trust is gone, nobody at the table is having any fun. That's why safety tools exist for role-playing games. Players felt like they couldn't communicate their concerns whenever a scene was getting too dark or uncomfortable for them. And that happens sometimes. And even if they did communicate it, people weren't listening. When the trust went away, something had to be invented in order to force communication and bridge the gap. Now people can have like an X card. And if a scene gets too dark and uncomfortable, they can play the X card, the scene ends, and everybody moves on, no questions asked. I like that these tools exist, but they also kind of make me sad because it means that there was a major breakdown in trust and respect. So take a second. Think about how you facilitate trust at your table, whether it's with your friends or with strangers. Talk to each other. Feel each other out. And whenever the game starts, don't stop listening. Look, everyone wants to tell a cool story. And everyone is also afraid that they're going to tell a story that nobody thinks is cool. And with role-playing games, we have an opportunity to push ourselves with our friends out into the deep water where our toes don't touch. That sweet spot where the exciting shit happens. Not everyone's the same height. And every once in a while, somebody's going to go under, but nobody should be letting anybody else drown. That's what exciting theater feels like, improvisational or otherwise. And that's absolutely what great role-playing games feel like. So the next time you are at your table and you see a fellow player going out of their depth, give them a hand. And if the waves come for you next, don't be afraid to reach out. Trust that someone will be there. Hey, what's going on? Holy crap. This is the postscript of the video where I say thank you so much for watching. That's mostly it. I'm Jay. This is Out of Depth. I do this with my wife. We're just trying to make content about storytelling, role-playing games, how we relate to each other through the stories we tell, that kind of stuff. If you're into that kind of thing, that's what we're going to be doing. If you were really into the improv portion of this video, then I've also included in the description below a link to a encyclopedia of short form improv games. And the next time you're having a game night with your friends, don't play Pictionary or Ticket to Ride, even though I love Ticket to Ride. You know, abandon Catan for an evening and play the alphabet game with your friends. Just you guys, no audience. You're the audience. Have fun with it. I think you'll have a good time. You might learn a thing or two about each other, and it'll just be a new experience. Whatever it is that you want to do after watching this video, I hope it includes getting together with somebody. Stranger, somebody you haven't talked to in a while, a friend, a loved one. Get together with somebody, tell a story, have fun. Doesn't that sound nice? That sounds nice. Thanks for watching. See you next time.